Beloved, there is something you need to hear carefully because the truth surrounding your soulmate may be far more complicated than the version you were ever allowed to see. For a long time, you may have wondered why this person could feel so deeply connected to you and yet suddenly become distant whenever the connection began moving toward something serious. Why their affection sometimes felt undeniable while their actions seemed restrained. Why they could look at you as though there were 1,000 words behind their eyes and then disappear into silence when all you wanted was one honest answer. There may have been something they never told you. Something that changed every decision they made around you. Something they were afraid would cause you to walk away the moment you discovered it. In this story, your soulmate is already married. But that is not the entire truth. And what they kept hidden about that marriage may explain why they behaved in ways you could never completely understand. Before you allow your heart to react, understand something important. This is not a message asking you to ignore boundaries, become involved in someone else's relationship, or place your life on hold while another person decides what they want. Whatever your soulmate feels, their responsibilities and choices belong to them. Your dignity must remain yours. But sometimes understanding the hidden context behind someone's behavior can finally bring clarity to a chapter that has felt impossible to explain. Your soulmate did not expect to meet you. That is where everything became complicated. Their life had already taken a particular shape long before your connection began. They had obligations. They had routines. There were people around them who believed they understood exactly what their future would look like. From the outside, their life may have appeared settled, predictable, perhaps even happy. But appearances often reveal very little about what happens inside a relationship when the doors close and the public performance ends. Your soulmate had been carrying loneliness for longer than anyone knew. They learned how to function inside it. They became skilled at waking up, handling responsibilities, speaking normally, attending gatherings, and maintaining the image that nothing significant was missing. There were photographs. There were conversations. There were shared responsibilities. Perhaps there were years of history. But history and emotional intimacy are not always the same thing. Your soulmate may have entered their marriage during a very different chapter of their life. They may have genuinely believed it was the right decision at the time. Perhaps the relationship once contained warmth, affection, and hope. But something changed. Maybe slowly, maybe so gradually that neither person noticed at first. Conversations became practical instead of emotional. Days became routines. Questions about dreams were replaced by discussions about responsibilities. The relationship continued functioning, but your soulmate quietly stopped feeling understood. They told themselves this was normal. They believed every long-term relationship eventually became less emotional. They told themselves that stability should be enough. They said gratitude should replace longing. So they stopped asking why something inside them felt empty. They adapted. Then you appeared and suddenly everything they had successfully ignored became impossible to ignore. Your soulmate did not need you to say anything extraordinary. There was something about your presence itself. The first conversations may have seemed innocent. Perhaps there was humor. Perhaps there was an immediate comfort that neither of you knew how to explain. Maybe you spoke about ordinary things, yet your soulmate walked away from those conversations feeling more emotionally awake than they had felt in years. That frightened them. At first, they tried to dismiss it. They told themselves they simply enjoyed speaking with you. They said you were interesting. They said the connection was harmless. But then they started noticing things. They looked forward to hearing from you. They remembered small details you mentioned. They began thinking about what you would say when something happened during their day. They wondered what you were doing. They noticed when your mood changed. They cared. And caring created a problem they had not prepared themselves to face because they had not told you the whole truth about their life. Your soulmate may have avoided speaking directly about their marriage. Perhaps they changed the subject. Perhaps they allowed you to assume they were more emotionally available than they actually were. Perhaps they told themselves they would explain later when the timing felt easier. But the longer they waited, the more difficult the truth became to reveal. At first, they feared losing your attention. Then they feared losing your respect. Eventually, they feared losing you completely. They knew that if they told you immediately, you might create distance. And part of them understood that you would have every right to do so. But emotionally, they were not ready to let the connection disappear. You had awakened something in them, not simply romantic attraction, something deeper. You reminded them what it felt like to be emotionally seen. You listened to things they had stopped saying aloud. You noticed the feelings they had learned to hide. When they spoke with you, they did not feel like the role they had been performing for years. They felt like themselves. And that feeling became dangerous because they began craving it. Your soulmate started living between two worlds. There was the life everyone saw, and then there was the emotional world where you existed. In one world they fulfilled responsibilities. In the other they remembered how alive their heart could feel. This division created guilt. They knew the situation was becoming emotionally complicated. They knew they needed to establish clarity. But every time they thought about stepping away from you, something inside them resisted. They tried. Perhaps you remember it. There were moments when your person suddenly became colder. Communication slowed. Replies changed. A tenderness that had been present one week seemed to disappear the next. You probably wondered what you had done. You replayed conversations. You looked for mistakes. You may have assumed they had lost interest. But inside them, a very different battle was happening. They were trying to control the connection. They believed distance would reduce what they felt. They thought that if they stopped speaking with you frequently, their emotions would return to normal. Instead, your absence made the feelings clearer. They missed you. They missed conversations they had once told themselves were insignificant. They began realizing how much emotional space you had quietly occupied. That made them panic because missing you forced them to admit that this was no longer casual. Your soulmate started comparing. They compared how they felt speaking with you to how they felt in their daily life. They compared the emotional depth, the curiosity, the excitement, the honesty, and comparison made the truth more uncomfortable. There were things in their marriage they had been avoiding, things they had accepted because confronting them would require major change. Maybe the relationship had become emotionally distant long before you appeared. Maybe trust had been damaged. Perhaps there had been repeated conflict that outsiders never saw. Perhaps both people had quietly become different versions of themselves and continued sharing a life primarily because separating felt more frightening than remaining unhappy. But your soulmate never told you this. And here is where the story becomes more complicated. They were afraid that explaining the problems in their marriage would sound like an excuse. They knew how easily someone could say, "My relationship is basically over," while continuing to remain fully committed to it. Your soulmate did not want you to believe they were manipulating you. Yet by saying nothing they created another kind of confusion. You could feel their emotion but could not understand their boundaries. One moment they moved toward you, the next they disappeared. They sometimes treated you like someone deeply important. Then they behaved as though the connection needed to be forgotten. You were receiving the effects of a truth you had never been given. Eventually, you may have started questioning your own intuition. How could someone appear to feel so much and then become so unavailable? How could there be such emotional intensity without clear action? Was everything imaginary? Was your heart creating meaning where none existed? Your soulmate knew you were becoming confused. This created even more guilt. They wanted to tell you. There were nights when they imagined the conversation. They rehearsed the opening. I need to tell you something. Then they imagined your expression changing. They imagined disappointment. They imagined you asking why they had not said it sooner, and they knew they would not have a satisfying answer. Fear. That was the answer. They were afraid. Afraid you would leave. Afraid you would see them differently. Afraid the connection would end before they had figured out what it meant. So they postponed the truth. But truth becomes heavier when postponed. Every tender moment made the secret more difficult to carry. Every time you trusted them, guilt increased. Every time you opened your heart, your soulmate felt the distance between what you knew and what they knew. Eventually, they realized something painful. Keeping the marriage hidden was not protecting the connection. It was making the foundation less honest. And yet there was another part of the story they were also hiding. The marriage itself may not have been what you would assume. Your soulmate may have been emotionally separated from their spouse for some time. Perhaps they were still legally married while living emotionally separate lives. Maybe practical responsibilities kept them connected, financial matters, children, family expectations, shared property, cultural pressure, fear of public judgment. There may have been reasons that made leaving more complicated than simply packing a bag. None of this automatically makes secrecy acceptable. Complicated circumstances still require honest communication, but it may explain why your soulmate felt trapped between the truth of their emotional life and the structure of the life they had already built. They were afraid that if they told you everything, you would only hear one word, married, and everything else would disappear behind it. Your person wanted you to understand the story, but they knew they had lost some right to control how you interpreted it because they had waited too long to tell you. Then something happened. You changed. You stopped chasing clarity. Perhaps you became tired of asking why they were behaving differently. You started creating distance. You stopped giving them the same emotional access. Your person noticed immediately. At first, they assumed you were angry. Then they started realizing you were protecting yourself. You may not have known they were married, but you knew something was wrong. You could feel that important information was missing. Your intuition kept telling you that the situation was not as simple as your person presented it. So you began stepping away from what you could not understand. And your soulmate became terrified, not because they wanted to possess you, because for the first time they saw the consequence of waiting too long to tell the truth. You were beginning to leave without ever knowing the entire story. Their silence was going to become your explanation. Your soulmate imagined you concluding that they never cared. That hurt them because they knew the opposite was true. Their problem was not that they felt nothing. Their problem was that they felt something they had no honest place for. And instead of dealing with that reality courageously, they had tried to manage it through distance. Now they were losing you anyway. Your soulmate started asking themselves what was worse: telling you the truth and risking losing you, or remaining silent and losing you because you never received enough truth to understand anything. The second possibility began feeling unbearable. Your soulmate may have recently spoken with someone they trust. Maybe a friend, maybe a sibling, perhaps someone who knows about the problems inside their marriage. They confessed that they had met someone who had changed how they understood themselves. They may not have used your name immediately. They described you carefully. They said there was someone who made them feel seen, someone they could not stop thinking about, someone they had tried to distance themselves from. The person listening probably asked the obvious question: have you told them you're married? Your soulmate became quiet. That silence revealed everything. The person may have told them they were making the situation worse. They may have said that regardless of the circumstances of the marriage, you deserve the truth. Your soulmate agreed. They knew. They had always known. But knowing the right thing and finding the courage to do it are different. Then came the question that changed everything. What exactly are you hiding about the marriage? Your soulmate finally admitted the part they had told almost no one. The relationship had been deteriorating long before they met you. Perhaps separation had already been discussed. Maybe divorce had been mentioned and then postponed repeatedly. Perhaps your soulmate and their spouse had been living more like roommates than romantic partners. Maybe they stayed because they were afraid of hurting children or disappointing families. Perhaps one person wanted to leave while the other resisted. The marriage continued existing legally and publicly while emotionally becoming something very different. Your soulmate had convinced themselves that because the relationship was already broken internally, their connection with you did not represent the same moral conflict it might appear to from the outside. But as their trusted person reminded them, you did not know that context. From your perspective, you had simply encountered someone whose behavior made no sense. Your soulmate realized that their private justification did not replace your right to informed choice. That realization was painful. They had been deciding what information you could handle instead of trusting you with the truth. They told themselves they were protecting you. But protection without consent can become control. They were controlling the story. They were allowing you to develop feelings without access to a fact that could significantly affect your decisions. Your soulmate began understanding why honesty could no longer wait. Endero. Your soulmate finally admitted the part they had told almost no one. The relationship had been deteriorating long before they met you. Perhaps separation had already been discussed. Maybe divorce had been mentioned and then postponed repeatedly. Perhaps your soulmate and their spouse had been living more like roommates than romantic partners. Maybe they stayed because they were afraid of hurting children or disappointing families. Perhaps one person wanted to leave while the other resisted. The marriage continued existing legally and publicly while emotionally becoming something very different. Your soulmate had convinced themselves that because the relationship was already broken internally, their connection with you did not represent the same moral conflict it might appear to from the outside. But as their trusted person reminded them, you did not know that context. From your perspective, you had simply encountered someone whose behavior made no sense. Your soulmate realized that their private justification did not replace your right to informed choice. That realization was painful. They had been deciding what information you could handle instead of trusting you with the truth. They told themselves they were protecting you. But protection without consent can become control. They were controlling the story. They were allowing you to develop feelings without access to a fact that could significantly affect your decisions. Your soulmate began understanding why honesty could no longer wait. But there is still more. The thing they kept hidden was not only the marriage itself. They had already been considering leaving before you entered their life. This matters because your soulmate has been afraid that if the marriage eventually ends, everyone will blame you. They fear that people will say you destroyed the relationship. They fear their spouse may accuse you. They fear family members may create a story in which you became the reason everything fell apart. Your soulmate knows that would be unfair if the marriage had already been breaking long before you appeared. So they created distance from you partly because they did not want you carrying responsibility for something you did not create. In their mind they thought, I need to resolve my life before I involve them. That intention sounds responsible, but they never explained it. So instead of feeling protected, you felt rejected. Instead of understanding that they were trying to prevent you from becoming part of their conflict, you thought they were losing interest. This is one of the tragedies of hidden truth. People can have intentions they believe are protective while their silence creates exactly the pain they wanted to prevent. Your soulmate may have wanted to solve everything privately and then return to you with a clean situation. They imagined one day contacting you and saying, now I can finally tell you everything. But life did not freeze while they handled their problems. You changed. You healed. You began realizing that you deserved someone emotionally available now, not someday. Your soulmate felt you slipping away and suddenly the fantasy of resolving everything before speaking to you no longer felt realistic. What if by the time they were ready, you were gone? What if someone else entered your life? Someone single, someone clear, someone with no hidden complications, someone who could choose you openly without asking you to navigate unfinished history. Your soulmate knows they would have no right to resent you for choosing that. That is what hurts. They know your happiness may eventually require you to choose someone other than them. They know love does not automatically give them a claim over your future. They want to say, I should have told you sooner. I was already married when I met you. I was afraid you would leave immediately. My marriage had been struggling long before you entered my life. I tried to create distance because I didn't want to involve you in something unresolved, but I handled it badly. You deserved honesty. And perhaps for the first time they are confronting the possibility that the most loving thing they can do is tell you the truth without demanding any particular response. They want to explain, not to pressure you, not to ask you to wait. They want you to finally understand why they behaved the way they did. Words have been growing inside them. Your soulmate knows the confession may change how you see every memory. You may feel angry. You may feel betrayed. You may question whether anything they told you was trustworthy. These reactions would be understandable. They cannot control your response. That is part of accountability. Your soulmate may want forgiveness, but they must understand that forgiveness cannot be demanded simply because the circumstances were complicated. Being lonely inside a marriage does not automatically make secrecy fair. Being emotionally separated does not automatically make every choice harmless. Their pain matters. Your autonomy matters too. They must be willing to hold both truths. This is the point where their growth will be revealed. Will they become defensive? Will they say you don't understand every time you ask a difficult question? Or will they say, I understand why this hurts and I should have told you? A person ready for a healthy future accepts the impact of their choices. They do not use complexity as a shield against accountability. Your soulmate must understand this before anything between you can become real. If they remain married, boundaries matter. Their feelings for you do not make it appropriate to ask you to become a hidden relationship. You should not be asked to live in secrecy. You should not be given fragments of someone's time while being told that a beautiful future will eventually arrive. You should not be placed into a competition with a spouse. Their existing relationship must be resolved honestly and independently of promises made to you. If they choose to remain married, you deserve clarity. If they choose to end the marriage, that decision must be theirs. Made because the relationship itself is no longer right. Not as a dramatic gesture designed to make you responsible for their future. You are not here to rescue them. You are not here to destroy a marriage. You are not here to wait indefinitely. Your soulmate's circumstances may explain why the road has been difficult. They do not determine what you must accept. This realization is something your soulmate may actually respect about you. They know you have standards. They know that if you learn the truth, you may create immediate distance. Part of them fears that another part believes you should because they do not want the person they love to become someone forced into hiding. They do not want you waking up every morning wondering when they will finally choose. They do not want your life reduced to waiting for updates about a relationship you did not create. If what they feel for you is genuine, then they must want more for you than secrecy. This is why they may be preparing to speak. Not because everything is solved, because they understand you deserve to know what is unsolved. That is different. Honesty does not require having every answer. It requires refusing to hide the questions that affect another person's choices. Your soulmate may contact you soon with a seriousness you have not heard from them before. Perhaps the message will be short. I need to tell you something important. Those words may immediately make your heart race. You may sense that the conversation will change things. Let them speak. But do not abandon your instincts. Ask what you need to ask. How long have you been married? What is the current state of the relationship? Why didn't you tell me? Does your spouse know the marriage is effectively ending, or is that only your interpretation? Are you actually separated? What do you expect from me now? These are fair questions. You do not need to feel guilty for asking them. Romantic language should never replace facts when real lives and commitments are involved. If your soulmate tells you they are leaving, look for action rather than future promises. If they say they are separated, understand what that means in reality. Are they living separately? Has the decision been communicated clearly? Are they taking responsible steps, or are they still living fully inside the marriage while asking you to emotionally wait? The distinction matters. Love does not become less spiritual because you ask practical questions. Discernment protects love from becoming fantasy. Your soulmate may cry. They may become emotional while telling you. They may say they never intended to hurt anyone. They may explain that they felt trapped. Listen with compassion if you choose. But compassion does not require surrendering your boundaries. You can say, I understand why you were afraid. And still say, you should have told me. You can believe their marriage was unhappy and still decide you do not want contact while they remain legally or emotionally involved. You can love someone and choose distance. Sometimes distance is not rejection, it is integrity. Your soulmate may need to experience the consequences of their delayed honesty. That consequence could include temporarily or permanently losing access to you. If they truly care, they must respect that. Someone sincere will not say, "If you loved me, you would wait." They will understand that love does not remove your right to choose. They will say, "I should have trusted you with the truth earlier. Now I will respect whatever you decide." That is maturity. Your person may secretly hope you remain in their life. Of course they do. They may imagine a future after their current situation is genuinely resolved. They may imagine approaching you openly. No hiding, no deleted messages. No unexplained disappearances. No fear that someone will discover what has been kept secret. They imagine taking your hand without looking over their shoulder. They imagine being able to introduce you honestly. They imagine finally experiencing the connection without guilt sitting beside every beautiful moment. This future may be emotionally powerful to them, but it cannot be built through shortcuts. If they truly want it, they must handle the present correctly. They must have honest conversations in their existing relationship. They must accept responsibility. They must avoid making you the villain in a story that began before you. They must give everyone involved enough truth to make their own decisions. There may be grief. There may be anger. There may be complicated practical consequences. Real life rarely resolves as cleanly as romantic imagination. But integrity matters, especially when circumstances are difficult. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that the courage required to love you is not simply the courage to confess feelings. It is the courage to tell difficult truths. The courage to accept consequences. The courage to resolve unfinished commitments before asking for a new beginning. The courage to risk losing you rather than keeping you through incomplete information. This is the transformation they are being asked to make, and you are being asked to remember something equally important. Do not let the revelation turn into a judgment about your worth. If they hid their marriage, that secrecy reflects their fear and choices. It does not mean you were foolish for caring. You responded to the information available to you. You trusted what you believed was real. There is no shame in discovering that the story contained facts you did not know. What matters now is what you do after learning them. You have permission to pause. You have permission to feel angry. You have permission to withdraw. You have permission to forgive without continuing the connection. You have permission to say that any future possibility can only be considered after their current relationship is genuinely and independently resolved. Your heart deserves reality. Your soulmate may have powerful feelings. They may genuinely believe you are the person who awakened something life-changing inside them. That can be true while another truth remains true. They were responsible for being honest about their marriage. Spiritual connection never removes ethical responsibility. Love should make truth more necessary, not less. Your soulmate may finally be ready to understand this. They have spent too long believing they needed to protect the connection from the truth. Now they are realizing that only truth can determine whether the connection deserves a future. The marriage is not the only secret. The deeper secret is that your person has been privately imagining a life completely different from the one everyone assumes they want. They have been questioning choices they once believed were permanent. They have been asking whether remaining in a relationship only because leaving is difficult is truly fair to anyone involved. They have been wondering whether both people deserve the freedom to find something more honest. They have been afraid of hurting others. They have also been afraid of reaching the end of their life knowing they repeatedly abandoned their own emotional truth. You did not create these questions. Your presence simply made them harder to ignore. This matters. Do not carry responsibility that belongs to them. Your soulmate must decide what their marriage means independent of you. Imagine you disappeared completely tomorrow. Would they still believe the marriage needs to change? Would they still want separation? Would they still recognize the emotional problems? If the answer is no, then they may be reacting primarily to the intensity of your connection. If the answer is yes, then their marital decision has its own foundation. They need to know the difference. So do you. You deserve not to become someone's escape route. You deserve to be chosen from clarity, not from crisis. Not from comparison, not because their marriage had a difficult week, not because you temporarily made them feel alive. If one day they approach you as a genuinely available person, let it be because they did the hard work of becoming honest before asking you to build something new. That is what would give the connection a chance of becoming healthy. Otherwise, the unresolved past will enter the new relationship with you. Guilt, fear, distrust, unprocessed grief. These things do not disappear simply because love feels powerful. Your soulmate must heal. You must protect your peace. And if a future exists, it must be created by two people who are free enough to choose it honestly. Beloved, the revelation may hurt because it explains so much at once. The distance, the hesitation, the sudden withdrawals, the moments when affection felt real but unavailable. The feeling that a piece of the story was always missing. There was a piece missing, a very important one. But clarity, even painful clarity, can free you from self-blame. You were not necessarily failing to make them care. They were dealing with a life circumstance they should have explained. You did not imagine every contradiction. There actually was a contradiction between what they felt and what they believed they were permitted to do. Now the contradiction has reached its breaking point. Your soulmate can no longer continue living one truth privately and another publicly without consequences. Something must become clearer. Perhaps they will recommit to their marriage and release the connection with you. Perhaps they will decide that the marriage has genuinely ended and take responsible steps towards separation. Perhaps the truth will create an outcome neither of you expected. You do not need to predict it. You only need to insist that whatever happens next be honest. Do not build a future from secret promises. Do not accept soon, forever. Do not allow intense words to substitute for actual change. Watch what happens when the confession becomes difficult. Does your soulmate remain? Do they answer questions? Do they respect your decision even if it hurts them? Do they take responsibility instead of blaming their spouse, family, or circumstances for everything? Those actions will reveal who they are becoming because the whole story is not simply that your soulmate was married. The whole story is about what they do once hiding is no longer possible. Anyone can feel trapped. Anyone can make mistakes. Transformation appears when a person stops using those facts to avoid responsibility. Your soulmate has been holding this secret because they feared the truth would cost them your love. Now they are beginning to realize that the secret itself may be what costs them your trust. Trust can sometimes be rebuilt, but not through more hiding, not through pressure, not through dramatic promises, through truth, through patience, through consistency, through respect for every person affected. Your soulmate may want to tell you that meeting you changed everything. Perhaps it did. But you are not required to become the answer to their unhappiness. You are not responsible for making their next decision easier. Your role is not to save them. Your responsibility is to remain loyal to what you know you deserve. A love that can stand in daylight. A love that does not ask you to hide. A love where important facts are not revealed only after emotional attachment has already formed. A love in which both people can make choices with full information. If your soulmate eventually becomes capable of offering that, you can decide then whether your heart still wants the connection. There is no deadline on your decision. They may have delayed their truth. You do not need to rush your response.